Chapter 1, The Longest Night. The night arrived gently, as if it had been waiting all year to step into the world. Snow had begun to fall in the late afternoon, soft flakes at first, drifting in slow spirals that turned the streets pale and quiet. By evening, the town had grown still beneath a fresh white cover, and the familiar edges of buildings and fences looked softened, as though the world had been wrapped in wool. It was the longest night of the year. In the little house at the end of a narrow lane, Alice Gray stood by the front window with her hands wrapped around a warm cup. She watched the snow settle on the sill outside, watched it gather on the branches of the bare tree in the yard until the limbs looked like they had been dusted with powdered sugar. A street lamp down the road cast a golden circle through the falling flakes, and the light made each flake seem briefly alive, bright for a moment, then gone. Alice wasn't a child. She wasn't even particularly young anymore. She had reached that quiet age where the world expected steadiness from her, where people assumed she had already decided what she believed in and what she did not. But on certain nights, especially on nights like this, she felt a faint ache beneath her ribs, a sense that something else existed just beyond the reach of ordinary sight. A realm of wonder that lived in the corner of the eye. A place you could only find if you weren't looking too hard. The fire in the hearth crackled softly behind her. The room smelled of pine and old books, of cinnamon and drying orange peel hung near the mantel. Her home was simple, tidy, and calm, warm enough to keep out the winter and quiet enough to let her thoughts stretch out and wander. And yet, even with all that warmth, she felt restless. Not in an anxious way, not in a sharp way, just a gentle unease, like a page left slightly turned in a book she could not finish. Alice took a slow sip from her cup. The tea tasted of chamomile and something faintly sweet, like honey warmed by candlelight. She set the cup down and breathed out. Her breath did not show in the air, the house was warm. Still, she imagined the cold outside, the way the snow would hush her footsteps. Her gaze drifted to the hallway where her winter coat hung on its hook. She told herself she didn't need to go out. The roads would be slippery. It was late. There was no errand that required her. But the longest night always felt like an invitation. Not the kind written on paper, not the kind delivered with ribbons and seals, something older than that. Something whispered by the season itself. Alice moved quietly, as if she didn't want to startle her own thoughts. She took her coat from the hook and slipped into it, then wrapped a scarf around her neck. She placed a wool hat over her hair, tugging it low over her ears. Before she opened the door, she paused. The house behind her was warm and safe. The fire glowed steadily. The clock on the mantel ticked at a slow, measured pace. Everything inside was known. Everything outside was not. Alice's hand rested on the doorknob. She listened, just for a moment, to the silence. It was the kind of silence that made space for soft things, the faint pop of firewood, the far-off creak of a settling roof beam, the whisper of snow against glass. Then she turned the knob and stepped out into the winter night. The cold met her at once, clean and sharp, and she drew in a breath that tasted like frost. Snowflakes touched her cheeks and melted instantly, leaving tiny cool points that made her blink. Her boots pressed into the fresh snow with a soft crunch. She stood on the porch and looked up. The sky was deep, dark velvet. Clouds drifted slowly across it, and through breaks in the cloud cover she could see stars, small, steady lights that seemed to watch quietly from far away. A few houses along the lane still showed faint light behind curtains. But most windows were dark now. People had gone indoors, gathered with families, or fallen asleep beside their own fires. Alice began walking. She followed the lane past familiar hedges buried under snow, past the small iron gate that led to a neighbor's garden, past the old oak tree that stood like a watchman at the bend in the road. The snow muffled everything. Even the far-off sounds of the town seemed softened, as if wrapped in thick cloth. As she walked, her mind slowed. That always happened in snow. Thoughts stretched out, quieter, less frantic. Each step became its own small moment, and the world seemed to ask nothing of her but to move gently through it. She walked without hurry, letting herself drift. The road carried her away from town, toward the fields beyond. Here, the land opened up. Tall grasses lay flattened beneath snow, and fences ran in straight lines that disappeared into mist. The fog was coming in. At first it was only a faint haze, a soft milkiness at the edges of her vision. But the farther she went, the thicker it became, until the world ahead looked like it might dissolve entirely if she kept walking. Alice should have turned back then. A sensible person would have. But on the longest night, sensible things often felt less important than quiet curiosity. She continued. The lane narrowed, became a path. The path curved gently, winding through a cluster of trees that formed a small woodland. Their branches were dark and skeletal against the snow, their trunks tall and still. Snow gathered on every limb and bough, and the air smelled faintly of pine and cold bark. Alice's boots pressed into the snow, leaving a trail behind her, proof, she thought, that she had been here, that this was real. The fog thickened between the trees. She could still see a few yards ahead, enough to keep walking, but everything beyond that faded into gray softness. The world became intimate, as if it had drawn closer around her. Then, through the mist, she saw a light. Not the warm gold of a street lamp. Not the steady glow of a house window. This light was pale, almost silver, and it hovered low, like a lantern carried at knee height. Alice stopped. The light did not move. It simply waited. Her heart gave a small, steady thump. Not fear, exactly. More like recognition. As if she had been expecting it without knowing she was. She took a cautious step forward. The light drifted back, just slightly, as though inviting her to follow. Alice hesitated only a moment longer before walking toward it. The lantern's glow illuminated the snow around it, revealing tiny sparkles and shadows. The fog, too, seemed to catch the light in soft strands. It looked like moonlight had been poured into mist. Alice followed the lantern deeper into the trees. The path became less clear. Snow had covered most signs of it, and the lantern seemed to float wherever it pleased. Yet each time Alice started to doubt, the light would brighten a fraction, revealing a gentle curve in the landscape, a gap between trees, a safe place to step. Time changed as she walked. That was the strangest part, though she could not have explained it if someone had asked. The minutes did not feel like minutes anymore. They felt like breaths, slow, spacious, uncounted. The fog grew so thick she could not see behind her. The trail of her footprints disappeared into gray nothing. For a brief moment, she felt a small pang of unease. Then the lantern brightened, and the unease melted away like snow on warm stone. She realized something then, quietly, without shock. She was not lost. She was being led. Alice walked on until the trees began to change. They were still trees, but their trunks looked smoother, almost polished, and the snow on their branches glittered more intensely, as if it had caught some hidden starlight. The air smelled sweeter, too, like winter air mixed with sugar and crushed mint. Her breath came out in soft clouds now. The cold had sharpened, but it wasn't painful. It felt clean, almost refreshing, like the kind of cold you wanted to wrap yourself in. The lantern drifted through an archway of branches. Alice stepped beneath it, and the world opened. She emerged from the trees into a wide clearing that should not have existed. The land here was flat and unbroken, a great expanse of snow that shimmered faintly as if lit from below. At the center of the clearing stood a door. Not a door attached to any building. Not a gate and a fence. A door, standing alone. It was tall and narrow, painted a pale winter blue, with white trim carved in delicate patterns, snowflakes, vines, and small stars. Frost clung to its edges, and the doorknob was made of clear glass that caught the lantern light and scattered it into tiny rainbows across the snow. Alice stopped several paces away. "Tea." The lantern hovered beside the door, its glow steady and patient. Alice's heart slowed. Her mind became very quiet. The door looked familiar in a way that made no sense. Not familiar like a place she had visited, but familiar like a dream you recognize as yours even when you can't remember when you dreamed it. She stepped closer. The snow beneath her boots did not crunch anymore. It whispered softly, like powder. Alice reached out her hand toward the glass knob. The moment her fingers touched it, warmth spread through her glove, not heat, not burning, but a gentle warmth like sunlight on a winter afternoon. The knob turned easily. Alice held her breath. She pulled the door open. Beyond it was not darkness. Not a room. Not another corridor of trees. Beyond it was a soft falling light, like moonlit snowfall, and the faint sound of something delicate, tiny bells, perhaps, or ice chiming in a gentle wind. And there was a scent, tea, warm bread, and something crisp like fresh snow. Alice stood in the doorway, looking into a pale, glowing space that seemed to stretch farther than it should. She could not see everything inside, only hints, shadows of tall archways, glimmers of candle flame, and the suggestion of movement far off, like figures walking slowly through mist. The lantern drifted forward, passing through the door as if it belonged there. It paused, as though waiting for her. Alice's heart fluttered, and for the first time that night, she felt truly, unmistakably awake. Not the ordinary kind of awake. The kind that happens when you realize the world is stranger and kinder than you thought. She stepped through. The cold vanished. A gentle warmth wrapped around her like a cloak. The door closed behind her with a soft click, not loud, not final, but certain. Alice turned to look back, and saw only pale light. No door. No clearing. No trees. Just the feeling of snow still clinging faintly to her coat, and the quiet certainty that she had crossed into a place that did not belong to ordinary time. Ahead, the lantern moved forward, leading her deeper into the glowing winter air. The sound of delicate bells grew clearer. The scent of tea grew warmer. And somewhere in the distance, a voice, soft and calm, spoke as if it had been expecting her all along. "Ah," the voice murmured, gentle as falling snow. "The longest night has brought someone new." Alice took a slow breath, and followed the light. And that is how, on the longest night of winter, Alice Gray entered the winterbound realm. Chapter 2: The Snow Hare and the Frozen Hours. Alice did not know how long she walked. Time, in this place, did not move the way it did at home. It did not march forward in neat steps or tick away in orderly seconds. Instead, it seemed to drift, like snow in still air, lingering, circling, sometimes pausing altogether. The lantern glided ahead of her, its pale glow floating just above the ground. Beneath her boots, the surface felt firm but muted, as though she walked upon snow that remembered every step but made no sound in response. The air around her shimmered faintly, and the soft chiming she had heard before grew clearer now. It was not music exactly. It reminded her of ice settling on a frozen lake, or glass touched gently by glass, quiet, delicate, never sharp. As she moved forward, shapes began to emerge from the glowing haze. Tall pillars rose on either side of a wide path, carved from ice so clear it looked almost invisible. Within the ice, faint images seemed suspended, snowflakes frozen mid-fall, stars caught in their slow descent, tiny clocks whose hands never moved. Alice slowed, drawn to one of the pillars. She reached out instinctively, then stopped herself. Something told her these were not meant to be touched. Ahead, the lantern slowed. It hovered near the edge of a broad, open space that stretched farther than Alice could see. The ground here was smooth and pale, marked with faint lines like those left by skates on a frozen pond. Above, the sky was neither night nor day, but a luminous winter twilight, soft blues and silvers layered together without a visible sun or moon. And there, standing at the center of it all, was a figure that made Alice pause. At first, she thought it was an animal. Then she thought it was a man. Then she realized it was something in between. The snow hare stood upright on two long legs dusted with frost. His fur was white as fresh snowfall, catching the light with a subtle sheen. His ears were tall and elegant, tipped with silver, and they twitched slightly as if listening to sounds beyond Alice's hearing. He wore a long coat the color of pale moonlight, buttoned neatly at the front. Around his neck hung a delicate chain, and from it dangled a pocket watch encased in clear ice. Inside the frozen glass, the clock face was visible, but its hands were perfectly still. The snow hare did not look surprised to see her. In fact, he looked as though he had been waiting. He consulted the frozen watch, tilting it slightly, as if the light might coax the hands into motion. He murmured, his voice calm and measured, like wind passing through bare branches. Yes, quite late. Or perhaps very early. Hard to say. Alice took a cautious step forward. "Excuse me," she said softly. The snow hare's ears turned toward her, then his head followed. His eyes were pale gray, reflective, and thoughtful, eyes that seemed to see not just where she stood, but where she had been. "Oh," he said pleasantly. "You can speak. That's good." I wasn't sure," Alice admitted. "Most aren't," the snow hare replied. "But then again, most don't arrive on the longest night." He tucked the watch back beneath his coat and clasped his hands behind his back. "You followed the lantern." "Yes," Alice said. "It led me here." "Of course it did," he said mildly. "It always does." Alice glanced back, half expecting to see the lantern still hovering behind her. But it was gone. "Where is it now?" she asked. "Elsewhere," the snow hare replied. "Or nowhere. Lanterns are like that." Alice considered this. It felt important, though she could not explain why. "Where am I?" she asked at last. The snow hare smiled faintly. "You are in the winter-bound realm. A place between moments. A place where winter pauses to think." Alice let the words settle. They did not frighten her. If anything, they felt right. "And you?" she asked. "I keep the hours," he said. "Or rather, I keep them from moving too quickly." He lifted the frozen watch again. "Time is prone to rushing ahead, you see. Especially where it does not belong." Alice studied the watch. "Why is it frozen?" The snow hare tilted his head thoughtfully. "Because tonight, time must rest." He gestured broadly, and Alice noticed something she hadn't before. Scattered across the wide frozen expanse were clocks, large and small, some upright, some half buried in snow, others suspended in the air like ornaments. All of them were still. No ticking, the snow hare continued. No counting. No hurry. Alice felt her shoulders loosen, as if something she hadn't known she carried had been gently lifted away. "At home," she said quietly, "time never seems to stop." "No," the snow hare agreed. "It rarely does." He began walking, and Alice followed instinctively. His steps left faint frost patterns behind him that faded almost as soon as they appeared. "Do you know why you're here?" he asked without looking back. "I don't," Alice said honestly. "I just felt like I should walk tonight." The snow hare nodded. "That is usually enough." They passed a cluster of clocks half encased in ice. Alice noticed that some showed different times: dawn, dusk, midnight, yet all were frozen. These hours, the snow hare said, noticing her gaze, belong to those who have forgotten how to pause. Forgotten? Alice echoed. Yes, he said gently. Or never learned. They came to a low stone bench dusted with snow. The snow hare sat, folding his long legs neatly, and gestured for Alice to sit beside him. She did. The cold stone did not chill her. Instead, it felt pleasantly cool, grounding. You come from a place where time presses forward, the snow hare said. Where it insists on answers, decisions, conclusions. Alice nodded slowly. Here, he continued, we allow questions to linger. He reached into his coat and withdrew the pocket watch again. For the first time, Alice noticed tiny cracks running through the ice that encased it. Each visitor leaves a mark, he said. Not on the realm, but on time itself. He turned the watch so she could see more clearly. The cracks glimmered softly. What kind of mark? Alice asked. A pause, the snow hare replied. A breath. They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the faint chiming in the air. Will time start again? Alice asked eventually. Yes, the snow hare said. It always does. When? When you are ready to leave, he answered. Alice looked down at her hands, then back up at the frozen sky. I don't know how long I'll stay. The snow hare smiled. You don't need to. He rose smoothly to his feet. Come. Others will wish to meet you. Others? Alice asked, standing. The winter host, he said. The gardener. Perhaps even the queen, if she feels inclined. Alice's heart fluttered, not with fear, but with curiosity. The snow hare began walking again, and Alice followed. As they moved farther across the frozen expanse, Alice noticed something strange. Though the air was still, snowflakes began to fall, slowly, lazily, drifting down around them. Yet when the flakes reached the ground, they did not melt. They did not pile up. They simply hovered, suspended in the air just above the surface, as though unsure whether to land. Why don't they fall? Alice asked. Because the night hasn't decided where to put them yet, the snow hare replied. They passed beneath an archway of ice shaped like intertwined branches. Beyond it, Alice could see warm candlelight flickering in the distance, and hear the faint murmur of voices, low, calm, inviting. She stopped at the threshold. The snow hare turned to her. Once you pass through, he said, things may feel gentler. Stranger. Slower. Alice looked at the drifting snow, the frozen clocks, the pale sky that seemed to hold its breath. I think, she said softly, that's exactly what I need. The snow hare inclined his head. Then welcome. He stepped through the archway, and Alice followed, leaving the frozen hours behind as the soft glow of gathering light grew warmer ahead. And somewhere, deep within the realm, a single clock gave the faintest creak, as if preparing, one day, to move again. Chapter 3, The Endless Winter Table. The light beyond the archway warmed gradually, not all at once, but in gentle layers, like a room waking slowly at dawn. Alice stepped forward and felt the air change around her. It was still winter cool, but touched now with comfort, like the warmth that gathers beneath heavy blankets while snow taps softly at the window. The snow hare walked ahead, his pale coat catching candlelight as they moved. The frozen expanse behind them faded, replaced by a broad hall whose ceiling arched high above, supported by slender columns carved from ice and stone. Between the columns hung garlands of evergreen dusted with frost, their needles glistening faintly. Candles floated in midair, steady and calm, their flames neither flickering nor wavering, as though protected from all drafts. At the center of the hall stretched a long table. It seemed to go on far longer than any table should, extending into the soft glow at either end, vanishing gently into haze. Its surface was polished wood, warm in tone, with pale frost curling along the edges like lace. White cloths were laid neatly across it, embroidered with subtle silver patterns that shifted slightly when Alice tried to focus on them. Chairs lined both sides, tall-backed and elegant, each one different in design, yet harmonious, as though they had been collected slowly over many winters. The table was already set. Teacups steamed quietly. Plates held slices of bread still warm, bowls of pale fruit dusted with sugar, and delicate pastries shaped like stars and snowflakes. Small lanterns rested between settings, casting soft pools of light that overlapped gently, leaving no harsh shadows. Voices murmured low and calm, blending into a soothing hum. Figures sat along the table, some close enough to see clearly, others softened by distance. They were not hurried. No one gestured sharply or spoke loudly. Movements were slow and deliberate, as if everyone had agreed, without discussion, that this was a place for gentleness. The snow hare paused beside an empty chair near the center. "This is the winter table," he said quietly. "It gathers those who arrive on nights like yours." Alice took in the scene. "It feels peaceful." "It is," the snow hare replied. "So long as it is allowed to be." He gestured for her to sit. Alice lowered herself into the chair. It was comfortably warm, as though someone had just risen from it. The table beneath her hands felt solid and reassuring. A teacup sat before her, porcelain thin and white, with a faint design of frost etched around the rim. Steam curled upward, carrying a scent that made her chest loosen, a blend of herbs, citrus peel, and something she couldn't quite name, but which reminded her of winter evenings spent indoors while snow fell outside. She wrapped her hands around the cup. The snow hare took the seat beside her. Across the table sat a tall figure dressed in layers of soft gray and blue fabric. His hair was white, but not with age, more like frost that had chosen to remain. His eyes were kind and observant, and when he smiled, it felt as though the hall itself grew warmer. "The guest has arrived," he said, his voice smooth and welcoming. "On the longest night, no less." Alice felt her cheeks warm. "I didn't mean to intrude." "You did not," the man said gently. "You were invited." "I don't remember receiving an invitation," Alice said. He smiled wider. "Those are the best kind." The snow hare inclined his head. "Alice Gray," he said. "This is the winter host." Alice nodded politely. "It's nice to meet you." "And you," the winter host replied. "You've traveled far tonight." "I walked," Alice said. "But it didn't feel very far." "That happens here," the winter host said. "Distance behaves differently." He gestured down the length of the table. "Please. Eat. Drink. You may listen if you wish. You may speak if you wish. Neither is required." Alice took a small sip of tea. The warmth spread through her slowly, not like heat, but like ease. Her shoulders relaxed. Her breathing deepened without effort. The low murmur of voices seemed to settle around her, steady and rhythmic, like waves lapping against the quiet shore. To her left, a woman with dark hair threaded with silver spoke softly to the person beside her about a winter she had once known, one filled with long nights and quiet patience. Across from Alice, a pair of figures shared a gentle laugh, not loud, but sincere, the sound lingering briefly before dissolving into calm. No one asked Alice questions. No one watched her expectantly. She realized how rare that felt. The winter host lifted his cup. "To stillness," he said. Others echoed the sentiment quietly. Cups were raised. No clinking broke the calm. "To stillness," Alice murmured, surprised by how easily the words came. She ate a small piece of bread. It tasted simple and nourishing, as though it had been made without hurry. Each bite grounded her further in the moment. "How long does the table last?" Alice asked after a time. The winter host considered this. "As long as it is needed." "And when is that?" she asked. "When the night loosens its hold," he replied. "Or when a guest feels ready to wander again." Alice nodded. That answer satisfied her more than any precise measure would have. A gentle hush fell over the table as a new presence approached. From the far end of the hall came a figure dressed in pale layers of white and clear fabric, as though woven from frost itself. She moved slowly, deliberately, carrying a tray upon which rested a single teapot made of glassy ice. Within it, liquid light swirled gently. "The gardener sends her regards," the figure said softly, setting the pot at the center of the table. "She says the roses are listening tonight." The winter host smiled. "Then we are fortunate." The figure inclined her head and moved on, her steps soundless. Alice glanced at the snow hare. "The gardener?" He nodded. "She tends what winter preserves." "What does winter preserve?" Alice asked. The snow hare's ears twitched slightly. "Memories. Quiet truths. Things too fragile for other seasons." The teapot was poured, and Alice accepted a second cup. This tea tasted different, cooler, clearer, like melted snow warmed just enough to drink. As she sipped, images drifted through her mind unbidden, moments she had not thought of in years. A window glowing at dusk. The sound of footsteps in snow. The comfort of silence shared with someone who did not demand words. Her eyes stung slightly, but not with sadness. With recognition. Across the table, the winter host watched her kindly. "Winter remembers," he said softly. "Even when we try not to." Alice set her cup down carefully. "Is that why people come here?" "Yes," he replied. "Some come because they are tired. Some because they are curious. Some because winter called, and they listened." The murmurs around the table rose and fell, weaving together into a low, steady harmony. Alice felt as though she were drifting while sitting perfectly still. Eventually, the snow hare rose from his seat. "The hours are holding," he said quietly to the winter host. "But they will not hold forever." "Of course," the winter host said. "Nothing here does." He turned to Alice. "You are welcome to stay longer. Or you may walk." Alice looked down the table. It stretched endlessly, inviting and calm. She felt she could remain here a very long time. But beyond the hall, she sensed something waiting, another part of the realm, quieter still. "I think," she said slowly, "I'd like to see more." The winter host nodded. "Then take what you need with you." Alice frowned slightly. "What do I need?" He smiled. "That will become clear." The snow hare gestured toward a side passage, where the candlelight softened into a pale, cool glow. "The garden lies that way," he said. "Beneath ice and glass." Alice rose from her chair. As she did, the weight she hadn't known she carried felt lighter, as though the table itself had quietly taken it from her. She glanced back once more. The guests continued their low conversations. The candles burned steadily. The table remained, timeless and patient. Alice followed the snow hare toward the passage, the soft hum of voices fading behind her. As she stepped away, a faint sound echoed through the hall, a gentle tap, like ice touching ice. Somewhere, unseen, a clock shifted slightly. And the winter table waited, as it always did, for those who needed stillness on the longest night. Chapter 4: The Garden Beneath Ice. The passage led downward, though Alice could not recall taking a single step down. It felt instead as if the world itself gently inclined, guiding her forward without effort. The air grew cooler again, clearer, tinged with a faint sweetness that reminded her of winter apples and frozen roses. The candlelight faded behind them, replaced by a pale, silvery glow that seemed to come from everywhere at once. They emerged into the garden. It stretched wide beneath a vaulted sky of crystal ice, arched high overhead like the inside of a frozen cathedral. Light filtered through the ice above, refracted into soft rainbows that drifted lazily across the snow-covered ground. No wind stirred here, yet everything shimmered, alive with quiet motion. Paths curved gently through the garden, outlined by low hedges made not of leaves, but of glass, each branch clear and smooth, catching the light and bending it into delicate patterns. Snow lay lightly atop them, never sliding off, never piling too heavily. And everywhere, roses bloomed. They were carved from ice and glass, each petal impossibly thin, layered with painstaking care. Some were clear as water, others tinted faintly pink, blue, or silver. Frost traced their edges like embroidery. They did not sway, yet they felt alive, as though they breathed in a slower rhythm than the world Alice knew. Alice stopped in awe. "They're beautiful," she whispered. "Yes," said a new voice, calm and resonant, as if spoken through still water. "Winter is careful with what it keeps." Alice turned. Standing a few paces away was a woman dressed in layers of pale gray and white, her garments flowing softly despite the absence of wind. Her hair was long and dark, streaked with silver like frost along midnight branches. Her eyes were clear and thoughtful, reflecting the garden around them. She held a pair of shears made of translucent crystal, their edges glowing faintly. "The glass gardener," the snow hare said quietly, bowing his head. The gardener inclined hers in return, then looked to Alice. "You are the one who followed the lantern." "I did," Alice said. "I didn't know where it would lead." "Few ever do," the gardener replied. "That is why it works." She gestured for Alice to walk with her along one of the curved paths. Alice followed, stepping carefully between beds of frozen roses. Beneath the glassy petals, she noticed faint images, reflections not of the garden, but of moments. A pair of hands warming over a fire. A window lit against falling snow. Footprints side by side on a winter path. Alice slowed, her breath catching. "These are memories," she said softly. "Yes," the gardener replied. "But not only yours." She knelt beside one rose and trimmed a petal with delicate precision. The removed shard did not fall. It dissolved into light. "This garden preserves what might otherwise be lost," the gardener continued. "Moments that were quiet, gentle, unremarkable at the time, but important," Alice said. The gardener smiled faintly. "You understand." Alice paused beside a rose whose petals glowed faintly gold. Within it, she saw herself as she had been years ago, sitting alone by a window much like the one she had stood at that evening, holding a cup, watching snow fall, feeling both comforted and lonely all at once. "I didn't realize I'd remember that," Alice said. "You didn't," the gardener said gently. "The season did." They walked on. Alice noticed that some roses were cracked, their petals fractured slightly, yet still beautiful. "What happens to the broken ones?" Alice asked. "We tend them," the gardener replied. "Winter does not discard what is fragile. It slows it, protects it, gives it time." Alice thought of how often she had rushed herself, through decisions, through feelings, through seasons that asked for patience she did not think she had. The snow hare walked a short distance behind them, silent and observant. At the center of the garden stood a single rose unlike the others. Taller, clearer. Its petals shimmered with a soft, steady light, untouched by frost. Alice felt drawn to it at once. "That one," she said. "Why does it feel different?" The gardener regarded it thoughtfully. Because it has not yet been decided. Decided? Alice echoed. Yes, the gardener said. Some moments wait. They are not memories yet. They are possibilities. Alice approached the rose slowly. Within its petals, she saw not an image, but a feeling, a sense of calm she had not known in a long time. Not happiness exactly. Something steadier. Peace. What happens to it? Alice asked. That depends, the gardener replied. On whether you carry winter with you when you leave. Alice turned. Leave? All who come here do, the gardener said gently. Even those who wish they wouldn't. Alice felt a faint pang at that, though she did not yet know why. The gardener clipped one small petal from the rose. It hovered briefly, then settled into Alice's palm. It was cool, smooth, and light as breath. A gift, the gardener said. Not to keep. To remember. The petal melted slowly, leaving no trace, yet Alice felt as though something had settled quietly inside her chest. The queen will wish to see you, the gardener added. Alice's heart gave a small, steady beat. The queen of stillness. Yes, the gardener said. She rarely receives visitors directly. But tonight. It is the longest night, the snow hare said. Indeed, the gardener replied. She stepped back, allowing the light of the garden to fold around her once more. Go gently, she said to Alice. Stillness listens. The snow hare gestured toward a narrow path beyond the garden, where the ice darkened into deeper blues and silvers. Alice took one last look at the roses, the preserved moments, the waiting possibilities, and then followed. Behind her, the garden remained, quiet and patient, holding its fragile beauty beneath ice and light. And somewhere within its crystalline petals, winter continued to remember. Chapter 5, The Queen of Stillness. The path beyond the garden narrowed, the glass hedges giving way to smooth stone dusted with snow so fine it looked like powdered light. Alice followed the snow hare in silence. The air grew quieter with every step, not empty, but listening, as though the realm itself leaned in to hear what might be said next. Ahead, the glow deepened into cooler hues, blues and silvers layered like twilight over frozen water. The faint chiming that had followed Alice since her arrival softened until it was barely more than a suggestion. Even her footsteps seemed to dissolve before they could fully sound. They came at last to a wide terrace overlooking a vast, frozen lake. The ice was flawless and clear, stretching outward until it merged with the horizon. Beneath it, faint lights moved slowly, like stars drifting in deep water. The sky above mirrored the lake below, no sun, no moon, only a luminous stillness that felt balanced, complete. At the far edge of the terrace stood a throne carved from ice and stone, simple in shape, unadorned, and perfectly symmetrical. It did not loom or intimidate. It waited. And seated upon it was the Queen of Stillness. She rose as Alice approached, not abruptly, but with a grace so measured it felt as though time itself had paused to accommodate the movement. Her gown flowed in layers of pale gray and frost white, each fold falling without sound. Her hair was long and dark, threaded with silver, and it lay over her shoulders like quiet snowfall. Her face was calm, composed, and distant, not cold, but reserved, as a winter lake reserves its depths. Her eyes were the color of early dawn seen through ice, and when they met Alice's, Alice felt neither judged nor welcomed. Only seen. The snow hare bowed deeply, then stepped back, leaving Alice alone on the terrace. The queen regarded her for a long moment. The silence stretched, but it was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that gave space to breathe. You came on the longest night, the queen said at last. Her voice was low and even, carrying no echo. Few do. I didn't plan to, Alice replied softly. I just walked. The queen inclined her head slightly. Walking is often enough. Alice stood still, her hands folded loosely at her sides. She felt no urge to fidget, no need to fill the quiet. The cold air touched her cheeks gently, without bite. "You have been to the table," the Queen said. "In the garden?" "Yes," Alice said. "They were kind." The Queen's expression did not change, but something in her gaze softened by the smallest degree. "Kindness is allowed here," she said. "So long as it does not hurry." Alice considered this. "Is that why you rule this place?" "I do not rule," the Queen replied. "I hold." She gestured toward the frozen lake. Winter is not an absence. It is a pause. A deep breath taken by the world. Alice followed the gesture. Beneath the ice, the lights drifted slowly, untroubled by any current. She felt the steadiness of it settle into her bones. "At home," Alice said after a moment, "stillness feels difficult. People avoid it." The Queen turned her gaze back to Alice. "Stillness asks questions that noise cannot answer." Alice nodded. That felt true. "You are wondering why you were brought here," the Queen continued. "I think I am," Alice said. The Queen stepped down from the throne and walked toward her. Each step was measured, precise. When she stopped before Alice, the air seemed to settle around them, as if the world itself leaned closer. "You arrived carrying many hours," the Queen said. "Some heavy. Some unfinished." Alice felt a small ache in her chest, not pain, but recognition. "Winter takes these hours and slows them," the Queen went on. "Not to erase them. Not to judge them. Only to let them rest." She raised one pale hand and held it open. In her palm appeared a small shape, clear and smooth, like a shard of ice shaped into a teardrop. "This is what you leave behind," the Queen said. Alice hesitated. "And what do I take with me?" The Queen looked at her for a long, thoughtful moment. Then she closed her hand, and the shard vanished. "You take permission," she said. "Permission?" Alice echoed. "To pause," the Queen replied. "To be unfinished. To carry quiet with you, even when the world insists on motion." Alice's breath caught slightly. She had not realized how much she needed that. The Queen stepped back, returning to the space before her throne. "You will not remain," she said. "No one does." Alice felt a flicker of sadness, quick and sharp, then gone. "I know. But winter will remain with you," the Queen continued. "If you allow it." The lights beneath the lake brightened faintly, then settled again. "Listen," the Queen said. Alice did. For the first time since entering the realm, she heard something beyond the chimes and quiet voices, a distant sound, barely audible. It was familiar. Steady. A ticking. Not loud. Not urgent. But present. "Time is waking," the Queen said. Gently. She met Alice's gaze one last time. "Go now. Walk without haste. Carry what you have learned, not as weight, but as warmth." Alice bowed her head, unsure why the gesture felt right, but knowing that it did. As she turned to leave, the snow hare stepped forward once more, his frozen watch now faintly misted, the ice beginning to soften. "The path will return you," he said quietly. Alice took a final look at the Queen of Stillness, at the calm figure framed against the frozen lake, holding the quiet balance of the realm. Then she followed the snow hare into the soft blue glow beyond the terrace. Behind her, the Queen resumed her seat, and the lake remained perfectly still, holding the pause until it was needed again. Chapter 6: Waking with Snow on Her Coat. The path home felt different. Alice followed the snow hare through a narrowing corridor of pale light, the frozen lake and silent throne fading gently behind her. The air warmed with each step, Not suddenly, not jarringly, but in slow degrees, like morning easing its way into night's last hour. The snow hare walked beside her now, no longer leading, merely accompanying. "The hours are moving again," he said quietly. Alice glanced at the pocket watch hanging from his chain. The ice that once encased it had thinned to a fragile shell. Beneath it, the hands had begun to move, not quickly, not urgently, but steadily. "I can feel it," Alice said. "Time." "Yes," he replied. "But you will notice it differently now." The glow ahead softened, shifting from silver to pale gold. Alice felt the ground beneath her boots change, from smooth and soundless to softly yielding. Snow whispered again when she stepped. She slowed. "Will I remember this place?" she asked. The snow hare considered her question carefully. "You will remember it the way one remembers a dream that mattered," he said. "Not every detail. But the feeling will remain." They reached the edge of the clearing where the lone door stood once more, pale blue against the mist. Frost still traced its edges, but the glass knob now gleamed warmer, reflecting a faint image of Alice herself. She paused before it. The snow hare inclined his head. "Winter does not ask to be understood," he said. "Only honored." Alice nodded. "Thank you." "For walking," he replied. "For listening." She reached for the knob. As her fingers closed around it, warmth spread through her palm again, not just warmth, but reassurance. The door opened easily. Beyond it waited the familiar hush of falling snow and the faint amber glow of street lamps. Alice turned back once more, but the snow hare was already fading, his form dissolving into drifting frost, his watch's soft ticking lingering just long enough to be heard. Then she stepped through. The door closed behind her without sound. Alice stood once again on the narrow woodland path outside her town. The fog had thinned. The trees were ordinary again, bare branches etched against the night sky. Snow fell softly, steadily, exactly as it had before. Her breath clouded in the cold air. She looked down. Snow clung to the hem of her coat. Alice laughed softly, a quiet sound meant only for herself. She walked back the way she had come, following the curve of the path, the familiar landmarks reappearing one by one, the oak tree, the iron gate, the hedges blanketed in white. The town lights glowed ahead, welcoming and warm. When she reached her house, the fire was still burning. The clock on the mantel ticked calmly, its rhythm unhurried. Alice removed her coat and scarf, brushing snowflakes onto the mat. She paused, noticing how her movements felt slower, more deliberate, as if the night had taught her a gentler pace. She returned to the window and looked out once more. The longest night was nearly over. Somewhere beyond the rooftops, the sky was beginning to lighten, just barely, a soft promise of morning. Alice wrapped her hands around her teacup again. It was still warm. She felt no urgency now. No need to hurry into the next hour, the next day, the next season. Winter lingered quietly within her, steady and kind. And as the snow continued to fall, Alice Gray stood watching, breathing, and resting in the pause she had been given, carrying stillness with her into the waking world.